came and spoke to the group here. How many years have been, Mark?
Oh, 10.
10 years, and I guess it's good that you've invited me back, that I guess I did okay, or maybe Mark thought that it's been long enough, everybody forgot about what a mess I made, and it was safe for me to come back again. But thanks for having me either way. I always like an audience, so that's a good thing. I have been the executive director of Great Rivers Land Trust for, seems like a long time, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We do land protection. Our original focus area, as Mark said, was up and down the River Road between Alton and Pierre Marquette State Park, and trying to protect the beauty of the scenic byway. It was the first national scenic byway in the state of Illinois, and it's probably one of the most beautiful drives anywhere in the state. It's made the 7 wonders of Illinois, and it's featured in a lot of the tourism guides and so forth. So it brings a lot of people to the community, and a lot of the community is now focused on ecotourism, so it all kind of works together. It's been a good project over the years. I'm just going to touch on a few of the projects we've been involved in. The reason I got to know Mark was his involvement with the Boy Scout camp in Godfrey, Camp Warren Levis, and I'm sure I talked about this last time I was here 10 years ago, but we had gotten involved in the Hyssop Creek Watershed project. Hyssop Creek comes into the Mississippi River about halfway between Alton and Grafton, and in the early days of watershed planning, we got involved in that. We put together a plan for the Hyssop Creek Watershed, which covers 78,000 acres. It's a big watershed. Goes all the way up to like Hyssop High School, Southwestern High School up at Hyssop. But when we were putting this together, this is back in 92, 93, there weren't a bunch of funding programs for watersheds. So our thought was, if we plan it, it will come, and it being money to help fund some projects, and little by little it did. But what really turned it around is when we got into a project with the Illinois American Water Company. And right after the flood of 93, the flood wiped out the water plant just outside of Alton, where they drew their water from the Mississippi River, filtered it, and sold it to the people of Alton and surrounding communities. But after their plant was wiped out, they built a new one on top of the bluff, and they were ready to go operational. And just before they were ready, the EPA stepped in and said, well, wait a minute, you're not grandfathered in on your discharge permit, and you're going to build these lagoons in addition to the plant you've already built, so that you can filter out the sediment, load it in trucks, and haul it to a landfill and basically bury the dirt. This was going to cost millions of dollars to build, and it cost $1 million a year to maintain it. And so the water company was in this battle with the EPA over their discharge permit and wanting to continue to do things the way they were. And finally the water company said, look, there's this group just upstream has this plan that we will fund the plan that they have if you'll give us our discharge permit, and the end result would be less sediment coming into the Mississippi River compared to what we draw out and put back in. And the end result would be a cleaner river. And the EPA agreed to this, and they gave the water company, Illinois American Water, their discharge permit, and in exchange the water company gave us a fund, $4.1 million over a 10-year period, to build structures up in the watershed to reduce sediment coming in. And one of those structures was the Boy Scout lake. And the lake had filled up with sediment over the years as Godfrey built up around it. And so the lake was so shallow, a couple of heavy Boy Scouts couldn't paddle all the way across it in a canoe. And so the plan was to restore the lake. And since we had some money from the deal we had with the water company, we restored the lake, removed 400,000 cubic yards of sediment from the lake, restored to a 20-foot depth. In exchange, the Boy Scouts gave us a conservation easement on the property. And what that said was that the property would never be developed. It stayed in its natural state like it had been, as the Boy Scouts using it, but they could continue all their activities, with the cabins, the lake, and all the scouting activities and the trails, all allowed as part of the deal. So it was a win-win situation for everybody. But one of the other things that Boy Scouts had asked, as time goes on, look beyond the Boy Scout camp. and other potential, buffers to it. And one of the things that we found out during the course of the restoration of the Boy Scout camp is that there was an Underground Railroad connection there. And so we looked into that, and I wrote a grant. We were able to get some money to do some archaeological research. And people think of archaeologists digging up dinosaur bones and investigating Native Americans, but archaeology doesn't have to go back that far. It also looks at the Underground Railroad activity. So we had a grant. We employed the Center for American Archaeology out of Campsville and also Principia College students, and did an archaeological study down through the Rocky Fork Creek Valley, and that's Rocky Fork, a tributary of Pisaw Creek that flows through the Boy Scout camp. And they found down in that valley these building sites of runaway slaves. And you all know how the Underground Railroad works. Missouri was a slave state, Illinois is a slave state. They would escape, come here, hide out until it was safe to move farther north as part of the Underground Railroad. And Rocky Fork Creek Valley was one of these safe havens. So they would come over, go to the Rocky Fork Creek Valley. It was the first tributary up Pisaw Creek, so they knew where to go. And they had sympathetic landowners that owned what is now the Boy Scout camp and other property. And they stayed there until it was safe to move on. But in this particular case, a lot of them stayed and lived there and built these little houses up and down through the valley made out of stone that they gathered from Rocky Fork Creek. And so the archaeological research found over 100 of these little foundations of these small stone houses that were up in this valley. They found 3 cemeteries, a number of wells, so there was an actual community there. So we took the next step and submitted that to the National Park Service, and the valley was designated as a Network to Freedom site, one of only 7 in the state of Illinois, for the Underground Railroad system. So that was another thread that came out of our work with the Boy Scouts. The other thing that we did is we were looking at the stream corridor. They call it the Riparian Corridor, and looking at additional properties, trying to protect this area that has ecological significance and also historical significance. And since the days of the Boy Scout camp and the conservation easement we have there, we have bought or purchased every single property between the Boy Scout camp and the confluence with the Pisaw Creek. And this has all just happened in the last few years. And the hope then is to create a trail that'll be open to the public eventually that goes the length of that valley and all the way down to the Pisaw Creek. So I just purchased the last piece of that puzzle along the creek corridor 2 months ago, so finalized that. So it was a big project. It took a long time, but now it's complete, and we're kind of looking at what can happen from that point all the way down to Pisaw Harbor. Pisaw Harbor is another little project that the Land Trust has worked on for a number of years. We purchased this property.
He has permission to leave, the rest have to stay.
Okay. Should I lock the door from this point on? We purchased Pisaw Harbor a number of years ago, right on the mouth of the Pisaw Creek along the Great River Road, and for a number of reasons. At the time, it had been a complex that had a restaurant and a bar and a gun store and a quick shop and a marina and gas station, a variety of things, but a whole lot of junk on it as well. And when we were first started up as an organization back in 1992, they did a lot of surveys and polls of the people in the community and asked what you'd like to see happen along the Great River Road. And the number one response was to clean up the intersection at Pisaw Harbor, right where it meets Lock Haven Road. And on one side of Lock Haven Road, there used to be a used mobile home sales lot, and we purchased that and cleaned it up, made it into a park. On the other side of Lock Haven Road, there was a tavern called Harris's Tavern, and it was kind of a mess too. We ended up, it came up for sale, we purchased it, cleaned it all up, made it into public park space. Then the last piece of the puzzle was Pisaw Harbor itself, and it came up for sale several years ago. And the Land Trust bought it, borrowed the money to buy it actually, $2.2 million. And borrowed money from one conservation group for $1 million and borrowed the other $1 million from a local bank, and we had $200,000 in our land acquisition fund, so we put the money down on it, borrowed $2 million. I got a grant to pay off $1 million of it 3 years in, and another grant to pay down a pretty good chunk of the other, and now we use the income from the boat slips to pay off the rest of our loan until it's gone. But since we have acquired the property, we have torn down 3 derelict buildings on the site. We removed over 35 derelict boats and trailers that were just all over the place, plus this, like 50 years of junk that had piled up. But one of the philosophies behind getting this piece of property from the start was, we got this river road that runs up and down from Alton to Pere Marquette, and it's this beautiful drive. But when you really think about it, from Alton to Grafton, it's almost one continuous guardrail, if you look at it. And you got the bluffs on one side, the river on the other, but there's really no chance to interact with the river in any way, or to even pull off and watch the eagles or whatever. There's very limited opportunities there.
Submarine races.
And with Hyssop Harbor, you've got a 55-acre complex on one side, another 20 acres on the other side. People can pull off and have a chance to interact with the river, whether it's pulling off to bird watch, to go fishing, go canoeing, go hiking, have a picnic, or just dip your toe in the Mississippi River and say you did it. So we wanted to create this space that is now open to the public. We created a riverfront park there. We have a very limited number of structures there. We've created more green space, and it is open to the public. Anybody can come in there. You can launch your boat, you can fish, you can picnic, you can do whatever, well, not whatever you want, but close to it. So it's become a kind of a special place and been a success story. And then, we continue to work with a lot of businesses too. Not many people know it, but we do a lot of mitigation work for various entities. Like when the new Walmart store came into Godfrey and they had their store footprint and their parking lot. We were kind of talking about this at the table. Every time you build something new, you got more runoff. So you have to offset that someplace or mitigate it. And the Land Trust has done that for the Walmart store. We did it for a group over in St. Louis called Pierce St. Louis. The new ethanol plant that was built down here in Granite City, the old military base. When they built the ethanol plant, they also built a barge port to service that plant, to bring in grain to take out ethanol. And when they did, they took out 66 acres of land. And so they're required by the Corps of Engineers to replace that. So the Land Trust sold them 66 acres of land that we owned on Hyssop Creek. It was unencumbered. We sold it to them, retained a conservation easement, so it's still protected. But also in doing so, it had to be modified. It had to be taken out of it being farmed, and so it had to be reverted back to its original wetland characteristics. So the Land Trust also did that as kind of a turnkey operation to satisfy the requirements of the Corps and also satisfy the needs of the new ethanol plant that went in down there. So we're trying to work hand in hand with environmental groups, with tourism groups, with historic groups, and with business groups as well. And always looking at the next opportunities. As a matter of fact, one of our biggest acquisitions of land happened just last week, a week from today. We purchased a 570-acre piece of land that's in the Illinois floodplain where there's no levee and it flooded regularly. So now we'll convert that back to a natural wetland river floodplain.